Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, C-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And I have a little more energy this week.
This time.
Last week, my nether end was dragging. But it was an awesome show anyway, because I just sucked it up.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Got to suck it up. But tonight, we do not have to suck it up. I don't have to suck it up, because I am ready to do this.
He's ready.
And tonight we are talking about yet another in our awesome prison series.
I see. Yeah.
And I think this might be, well, this prison is among the best yet.
Well, this prison is very common.
Very, very common. And this prison we're going to talk about tonight is the prison of habits.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not the habits that Sister Catherine wore.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Nor are these the habits that perhaps you may have inhabited. These are habits that inhabit you.
There's a scary thought.
There's a scary thought. So our inspiration tonight, as we were watching a video, a very interesting video series, which I would recommend to you highly, which is the Exodus series by Jordan Peterson and Company. But that's a completely separate topic. But in the course of fascinating because they go deeply into the book of Exodus, and but in the course of that discussion, one of the sort of side topics that was broached was the topic of habits, and I don't remember how they got there, but the phrase that struck us, was that habits are actually a form of spirit. They, to me, Margaret, evoked the splintering that you sometimes see in its most toxic or most clinical form, in a form of psychosis, where a portion of you is, in essence, distilled into an animating spirit, and this animating spirit can be, let's call it, totally calls it the pain body, but in a much less toxic sense, a habit, something which you kind of engineer within your mind to take care of a particular task that you do regularly, or a particular situation that you encounter regularly, is not just a simple, every time I do this, I do that. Every time I go outside, I have to have a cigarette or whatever the heck it is, a ritual. It's a little bit deeper than that, and that was sort of the fascinating thing. The way it was expressed in the discussion was that a habit is sort of an animating spirit. It becomes a piece of you which has the power to animate you. It has the power, in essence, to almost take you over. And there, he mentioned at the time, the person who was speaking about this mentioned at the time, that there are neurophysiological changes, and that reminded me of the way that a particular channel of behavior kind of gets burned into your brain, and the more you do that particular behavior, the easier it becomes, the deeper the groove of that channel becomes. And a habit has its own neurophysiological niche, if you will. But it's also a fragment of you. And so it also has roots, in essence, in the way the pain body gets formed through trauma or through other types of noxious experience. And it also has this idea of, if you want to break that habit, it's difficult. And one of the reasons that it's difficult, and this was sort of the most fascinating portion of this, is that it fights back. The habit can't really be erased from you. That was what the statement was. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it can't really be erased. What in essence you do is overwrite it with another sort of contrary overlaying behavior. And then you see this with people often, is that when they're under stress, their previous habit re-erupts or re-takes over. And the reason that it re-takes over is that the overlaying, sort of patch on top of the habit isn't as strong as the habit itself. So I thought that was really fascinating, the fact that, in essence, a habit is an animating spirit which you almost have to exorcise from yourself, sort of get out the holy water and the exorcism ritual to get rid of that habit. So habits seem to be dangerous a little bit, and a little bit sort of a little more macabre than I thought them to be initially. So once you develop a habit, developing a habit seems to be a dangerous thing.
Well, if you look at it in terms of a programmer, it's a subprogram that you're writing and putting into your body of programming. And it has a task. It does what it's been told to do, and it only does it repeatedly. And for humans to understand that you have the ability to set up these almost programmable pieces that automatically take care of certain things for you.
Yeah.
And that most of us do that subconsciously. You don't consciously say, okay, I'm going to set up this habit form so that I know that I will be able to do X, Y, or Z. Because that would be a positive use of it. Most of the ways this presents itself is that it's a habit form that you just defaulted to. No thought involved at all.
Unconscious habit forms.
And when you realize that you have this capability of rewriting those programs, it's uncomfortable, because in quote-unquote writing the program, you're actually taking a piece of your soul and manipulating it a certain way so that it will always act or respond to a certain situation that way. So if you're responding out of fear, then your fear response will present itself repeatedly. And for the most part, you won't even be aware that you're giving the fear response. So humans are very complex, exceedingly complex. And to cultivate the awareness that there is an aspect of you that does this. You got something in you that just writes these wonderful little programs out because that's what you do all the time. So it must be that that's what you want. And when you realize how much power you actually have, it's mind-blowing, because when you focus in on what you actually want, either in a situation or an endgame destiny kind of thing, your goal, your what will bring you to fullness, and hold that as your ultimate endgame, the habits that are formed are many and varied, because it means focusing on an end goal that is far different from where you are right now. Means you got to give up a bunch of things and try a bunch of things. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does, and but if we just go back to the fact that your mind does these things, sort of, you say it's unconscious. It is an unconscious behavior, or rather, it's an unconscious process. but it's you can see exactly where it comes from. Again, in part and parcel of this discussion, habits aren't part of your original programming. There are certain things, and this I'll just digress for 1 second, that there are certain things which are part of your quote-unquote ancestral habits, or ancestral programming, if you will. Some of those things can be seen in our visceral reactions to certain archetypal threats. A snake, or even the icon of a snake, shown to an infant with no particular response whatsoever, no prior experience with snakes, will evoke a fear response. And there are many of these archetypical archetypical, call them habits. They're sort of wired into our DNA and passed along through the DNA as part of the neurophysiological underpinnings of the brain. They're usually in the survival category. They're all kind of tied to survival. And you can see how they would be selected for, because it's important that even an infant should be afraid of a snake, because snakes are a thing that can kill you and would predate upon us, going back hundreds of thousands of years, way back into prehistory, when we were perhaps much more exposed to the elements. But the mechanism of forming a habit comes about because your brain is extremely pliable, extremely neuroflexible. And so when you encounter a new situation, a situation that you haven't prior to this have not experienced, your whole brain is involved. Your whole brain is involved in trying to figure this thing out. Then if you do that thing repetitively, if you do it in such a way that it's important, so it brings you money, it brings you food, it brings you something that you need and want and desire, the brain says, okay, now we gotta, we're gonna do this all the time, we gotta learn to do it as best as possible, and we start to refine, to engage lower and lower structures. And the way it was described is that the whole brain, the activity for this particular function, the brain activity for this particular function, moves from the whole brain over to the right-hand side of the brain and then back into the more instinctive and more reflexive or reactionary part of the brain. It doesn't involve thinking as much anymore. So, a case in point.
So what you're saying is that the experience is processed in the left side of the brain? And
in the whole brain.
Oh, in the whole brain.
And then it moves to the right side and
then
moves
it coalesces into the right side?
Exactly. Activity for this particular habitual activity, brain activity, I don't want to say activity. So brain activity for this particular habitual function, as it becomes processed and turned into a habit, moves into the part of the brain which is much more concerned with autonomous functions that don't require any sort of interrupt to the cortex. Okay, here's a case in point. Once you've acquired the habit of driving somewhere, you get in your car and you drive to this place. You get in your car, you drive to this place. The first time you do it, you don't know where you're going. Everything is, you're looking everywhere. You're saying, do I turn here? Do I turn? The 100th time you do it, you open the car door, you close it, you turn the car on, and you go into a zone. You're doing anything you want at all, and you end up there. And you're like, how'd I get here? You don't even care how you got there. Your brain piloted you all the way there to whatever this destination was because it knew. And in fact, you can see this again, Margaret, very, very easily. If you get into the car and you don't tell your brain, okay, we're going to this place, and you just start driving, it'll take the habitual route. You'll say, you'll turn right, and you'll turn left. And you say, why am I going to work? It's Saturday. And the brain goes, hey, man, you didn't tell me where to go. We're going to work. This is where we go, right? This is where we have a habit of going to work.
Yeah, this is how we drive.
This is how we drive. And you say to yourself, oh, geez, I was just, even say to yourself, oh, I was just following the program, No higher function was involved, but the habit is there. Okay, that's sort of innocuous. Nobody is hurt by the fact that you drive to work when you're not thinking about anything, except you say to yourself, oh, stupid me, I'm driving to work. However, habits aren't so innocuous or non-toxic all the time. A lot of times you can develop a habit which is reacting in a certain way, or reacting with inappropriate anger, inappropriate fear, inappropriate, negative emotion to a particular situation. And then once that habit is ingrained, then something triggers that habit which has really no relationship to the actual initial set of circumstances. That maybe that habit, in some circumstances, that habit could have been a survival thing. You were doing this because if you didn't, you were going to be hurt, or you were going to be killed, or you're going to be whatever, PTSD, right? But now that habit gets triggered when somebody cuts you off in traffic. All of a sudden you want to murder them.
Yeah,
and people, you're right, you
fall. I've been attacked. I have to attack back.
Exactly. So, and these types of habits are small and large, and once they've been written into the brain by this very low-level self-programming mechanism, they get written in a physiological manner. Certain neurochemical pathways in your brain get strengthened. Certain neurochemical pathways in your brain get weakened. And then it just sits there like a coiled spring, looking for a trigger.
Right. Just waiting for a trigger to activate.
And people with whom you cannot have certain conversations because it starts
oh dear.
the machine.
Yeah.
And they're just off.
Yeah.
And you know that they're going to have to go through their set of canned responses and canned actions and canned emotion. Everything's going to go through the machine until they're at the end. And then when they're finally at the end, you can say, that's not what I meant. But it didn't matter all the way through, because that
trigger,
animating spirit, that possession, takes them over. It isn't just a program. It's a piece of you, that has all the power of you, that can use your whole force of ability to hurt, ability to insult, ability to really destroy potentially. All of you is involved. And the Dalai Lama talks about this. When you're triggered, you're into the response, you're into the story, you're doing the actions, you're screaming at the top of your lungs before you even realize it. And then well into the whole reaction, you're going, what the heck am I doing? If you have any awareness whatsoever. Why am I swearing? Why am I screaming? Why am I treating this person as though they're my enemy?
Right. It is one of those, the example you gave previously, where suddenly you're driving to work and you only realize you're driving to work when you've made a wrong turn from the destination you want to go to.
Or somebody next to you says, where are you going? And you go, oh God, I'm just driving to work.
But to understand that there is that habit form, and how much time does it take before you realize you're just in your habit? Because that's the exercise in awareness. How long did it take you to realize that the old program is running and you didn't mean to do that?
I'd say for some folks, they never really realize that. Not driving to work, but the trigger that puts them into the fight or flight, or the trigger that puts them into the rage, or the trigger that puts them into the fear. They sit there and they're afraid, or they're enraged, or they're in fight or flight, and they have to go through the whole thing, and then maybe a day later they say, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I didn't mean to do that. And they try to apologize. You see this also behavior in folks who have either recovered from or are recovering from addictions, because these habit forms, which are also enabled in this case by one drug or another, nicotine or any other type of drug. These habit forms have triggers. So a good one is you're trying to quit smoking. Well, there's a neurophysiological dependency on nicotine, but even when you've completely rid your body of nicotine, completely gone, you've spent years now as a non-smoker. and you roll into a situation, you sit down next to somebody, you're in a bar or you're in a situation where this is the habit, and the habit form takes over, and you literally do. You reach across as naturally as though you were trying to do it, but it's almost like you're watching a movie. You reach across, tap the guy next to you, and say, "Hey, give me a cigarette." And the guy says, "Sure." He hands you a cigarette, and you throw it right in your mouth, you light it right up, and you puff away like you'd never stopped. And then you're going along, you're going, "What the hell am I doing? I quit smoking 10 years ago." It doesn't matter. The habit is there, waiting. It's not any more driven by the need for nicotine. That's out of your system. But the habit program isn't. It's going, "This is a bar. There's a guy next to us. He'll give us a cigarette. Go get one. I want one. Why? Because I just want one." And it possesses you. You literally watch your body do these things like, "Who the hell's moving my arm?" The habit is.
And when you realize that your habits have that much power over you.
That much power. Scary.
It's very scary because, frankly, the advertising industry understands that.
Oh, boy, do they.
And so they're trying to find all these little triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a whole science of how to hack people's brains in essence in advertising.
And really, most of us just don't want to believe that somebody would do that to another person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But when you look at the advertising industry and how much manipulation is done to get you to buy something.
Look at it right now. If you've spent any time looking at any TV channels in the last few weeks, they're all full of Christmas, aren't they? There's little Christmas trees on the side. They don't talk about them, but it's just there. And there's like little packages running through the thing, and they're going, "Wouldn't little Johnny like this?"
Well, the
freaking October. But they're trying to remind you. Oh gosh.
Yeah, you go shopping.
Christmas is coming.
You go shopping. They're already decorated for
right.
For
Other
Christmas.
People are shopping for Christmas. Yeah, they're
already. I mean, Halloween is coming
gone.
up, but that's on sale.
Yeah. Halloween's on sale.
Halloween's on sale.
That's the title of a book. Halloween's on sale. Because it's already Christmas, and it's October, 20-something. Isn't that interesting?
Well, it's becoming aware of how much your environment gets manipulated, and that awareness is something that you really have to try.
That's a habit you can develop.
Well, you have to try to break out of it. It seems like it's innocuous, but those are the most insidious forms that penetrate in. And frankly, if you give yourself permission to notice these things, yes, is there
somebody
a problem?
else has a habit of interrupting us.
It could be a problem. When you give yourself permission to notice these habit forms, how they're presented, I mean, it's one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it anymore. When you become aware of the fact that Home Depot is showing all the blow-up Christmas animated figures and the lights and the trees and, just whatever major outlet is trying to push all of these things that they sell.
Right.
Because you understand that what they're trying to do is sell you something.
Well, and trigger in you this urgency. I mean, one of the things that advertisers try to do is trigger a sense of urgency. And there's a lot of ways they do it, and we could list the ways that they go through. What they're really trying to trigger in you is this habit, this idea that, the price will never get better. This is the best price. This opportunity is limited. It's going to only be here for a week. We're doing this sale or that sale or this holiday or that holiday. All these things are playing upon inculcated behaviors, habits that they wanted. First, they spent the time to put the seeds of the habit into you, and then they call upon this habit. And they call upon it with these triggers. And it sounds, like, man, that sounds sort of really dark and really kind of almost like a conspiracy theory. But it isn't. You can go to school for this. You can go to school to study how to inculcate behavior and trigger that behavior.
Yeah, they'll give you degrees for that.
They'll give you degrees. And it's not just in advertising. There's lots of different ways in which you can be taught to instill a particular type of behavior in a person and then trigger that behavior. And it isn't always, it isn't always inimicable. It isn't always done with a nefarious purpose in mind, but it can be.
Right.
Obviously, it can be.
Right.
So to go back a little bit to our thesis, the prison of habits is not always voluntary. In fact, I would say it's largely involuntary, largely sometimes unconscious. In other words, your
unconscious habits. Yes.
Your unconscious brain is taking in information all the time and actually trying to form habits. Why? Thinking is difficult. It's something of the order of I'm going to say about a quintillion bytes of information is available to your brain at any given time. Think of all the things it's doing. It tries to find shortcuts. It's an amazing organ. It can think through an incredible fire hose of information and sort out what's important. But in doing that, it needs to take shortcuts. It needs to parcel off certain things that it knows are kind of like it falls into this pattern, so we know how to do that. So it doesn't have to think about it all the time. Because if you had to think about every action you were doing, you would be paralyzed. You couldn't run away because you're like, well, how do I run? I got to move this muscle and move that muscle and then move this muscle. And you're lunch at that point. Muscle's still trying to move, but I'm getting eaten. No, you're reacting, prepared to fight or flight, running before you even realize that the thing that was trying to eat you is trying to eat you. You're already down the pike because if you weren't, you are lunch. So we learned those things. But now... Instinctual. Now we've learned enough on how to hack those things in people, how to use them to inculcate or to engender certain behaviors. And we see the results of this habitual machine running in the back of your head, acquiring and preserving and ossifying certain habitual behavior, which may have started out as a reaction to a stressful situation where it was fight or flight or fear or something like that. But those deep structures in the brain are they give power to the habit. When a habit is based on a trigger of fear, it becomes very powerful.
Yes. Well, mostly because fear, most people don't want to look at fear.
No.
All they want to do is they choose to run, instead of standing and facing it. And in order to overcome a fear, that is usually the best way to handle it. You have to look at the fear and understand what it is that you are afraid of. Yeah. What is it exactly that you're afraid of? So if you allow yourself to just go into the unconscious habit form, it will have you do so many various random thought of waste of energy things.
That's a good point. Waste of energy.
It's just
and self-destructive and destructive of the people around you.
Well, it doesn't care. Maybe
No.
that's the best way to put it. That habit form doesn't care. All it knows is it's got to execute the way it's been formed.
Exactly.
And to bring yourself to that point and look at it takes a tremendous amount of discipline and a lot of grace. You have to give yourself a lot of grace when you realize that this thing has been driving me and I formed it and I've caused a lot of pain and suffering because of this habit. And you have to be able to look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to choose differently and I'm going to work on this. Now that alone, because there's a part of you that understands that to work on it means that there's a tremendous amount of energy that has gone into this unconscious habit form. And to undo it will take an awful lot of presence, consciousness, conscious decision every moment to redress the situation. But once it's done, you don't have to worry about it ever again. It brings up the memory of when you're trying to wean your baby off the pacifier. Because the pacifier is usually a point of security.
And it becomes a habit.
Yes, and then they just sit there and they suck on the passy. So you try to wean them off of that because they're going to be capable of other things. But my goodness, the screaming that starts when you're like, oh no, you don't need that right now. And they look at you, of course I need that. I've always had this.
Well, and the interesting thing about this is that habits fight back. Habits fight back. You know, what we should do is take we should stick to our habits. Take a little break, go back to the studio, have a little studio break, and then come back. And on the other side, and we'll talk about how you can fight against your habits and how they'll fight against you.
Batman Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today. Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Brag Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And tonight we are talking about another one of our prisons.
Yep.
Now, this is the prison of habits, and I think everyone is. We've been talking about the last half hour, many different types of habits, but I think everyone is familiar with the prison of habits. And here's a little exercise you can do. Now think to yourself, what bad habits do I have? And you'll think to yourself, well, I might have 1 or 2. And then ask the person that you live with how many bad habits you have. And if you want, after they've listed the first couple of dozen and you're kind of like, I get it. You can get them to stop after a while, because, if you want to turn it around, you can say, well, let's list each other's bad habits, and after the divorce, then you'll know all about that. So it's very easy. This is sort of a biblical take on this whole thing, but it's very easy to see the bad habits of others. It's sometimes difficult to see our own habits. I won't say just bad habits, but any habit. So habitual behavior is largely invisible to the person who is afflicted by it, and that's almost by design, because the brain hides your habits from you, and largely because the brain a habit feels entirely appropriate. It feels entirely natural. So, well, why doesn't everybody do this? and you'll find that nobody does this but you, or you're the person that has this habit, because your habit is as individual as you are. It's a fragment of you. And as Margaret said in the last half hour, to become aware of one's habits, especially the most noxious of them, it takes a deep sort of introspection. First of all, the very first hurdle in becoming aware of your habits is you have to say to yourself, is this good for me? Why do I do this? And some of the clues about whether or not a habit is good for you, or some of the clues about whether or not a habit should be looked at more closely, is if you see that the habit is causing damage to yourself or others, or pain to yourself or others. And Tolle spends a lot of time on the pain body, but the pain body could probably also be described as the set of unconscious habits, destructive behaviors, fragments of you, fragments that feed ego, fragments that take away from consciousness and drive you into an unconscious reaction state. Fragments which have all the power of you. They are you, or they're trying to tell you that you're you. They're trying to tell you that this is how we have to do this. These are the rules if we're going to survive. These habits are dangerous. These habits are destructive. And these habits, the very first step in getting aware of one, in getting rid of one, is to become aware. You see in these 12-step programs, the very first step is to admit, I am an alcoholic, for argument's sake. Because without the awareness, and then you say, well, I want to change. Awareness that you are this thing, and that you want to change this thing.
Yes. No, you need to be able to admit to yourself that this that I'm looking at, this habit, is a problem. And then you have to decide whether or not you want to change.
And maybe we should spend a little bit of this half hour, because we don't have a lot of time on this whole hour. We always run out, in trying to figure out how to move forward, how to change.
Well, first of all, to be open, to be teachable. Because a lot of us just, well, I know about that. Which means that you've closed the door already.
You should explain that.
Well, when you say, I know, internally, you basically say, I know everything there is to know about this situation, or what it means to be addicted. And you feel that no one can tell you anything else. But the only way you're going to be able to get out of that kind of situation is to admit that, I can't do this on my own. It's outside my purvey, outside my field of action. I must get outside help. And there's nothing wrong in admitting that. The problem is that we have a tendency to feel that we've failed at this point, that I'm not in control of myself. How could I fail?
And control is, remember, the prison of the prison of control, a prison of feeling that you're not in control, is the rebound. It's the fight back that a habit gives you. A habit pretends that you're in control.
Right.
And that drug, the drug that I'm in control, that I know what's going to happen next, is a large part of how a habit perpetuates itself.
Perpetuates. It goes not dormant, but it lies low and then waits for an opportunity to be able to reestablish itself. Habits are not stupid.
No. Not only are they not stupid, they're as smart as you are.
Yeah.
The smarter you are, the smarter your habits are.
And isn't that a revelatory thought? the habit that you're fighting is as smart as you are, that should just send shivers down your spine.
Right.
Because you keep thinking that you can outsmart you.
And that brings back to Margaret's point. The I know is the habit's way of fighting back against the we want to change this. If you say, I don't like this habit, the habit has all the smarts and all the intelligence in you to argue back, but no, but we have to for this and that. And so you start an internal debate where the habit has access to all the information that you do. So again, what Margaret said just a moment ago, you need an outside perspective. If your habit is part of your ego self, you need to go into consciousness, into awareness. You need to get outside of the ego, in other words, to see. Or you need another being, another person, someone who can give you another perspective on your habit. And without that, call it a higher power, call it a mentor, both those things are part of a lot of these 12-step programs. You need to both look for grace and have somebody physically in your presence to keep you on track. These are incredibly important because they're a way of objectifying the behavior and not allowing the habit to, in essence, play on the same field as the portion of you which is trying to rid you of the habit. Because if you keep that argument close and circular,
right,
then the habit is it's equal to you. It's like one force versus another, and you don't go anywhere. You get paralyzed.
Well, it tricks you into believing that, oh yeah, I took care of that.
Yeah, even better. Oh yeah, we took care of that. And then when the situation arises, bam.
Yeah, and then you fall back into
You're
the
right
same
back
old
in.
routine. It's just acknowledging the fact that you understand what your habit is. It's not some kind of subservient thing within you. It actually has a life in you. In the Bible, I believe they call them strongholds.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
Because it takes an awful lot to overcome a stronghold. And when you realize that it was built by you and powered by you, you are feeding the energy that maintains the stronghold.
Isn't it, physical analog would be a cancer?
Yes.
Okay, cancer is always bad, right? But a cancer is part of the body, or part of the mind in this regard, but part of the body. It is you. That's why your autoimmune system doesn't reject it, because it is you, but yet it has all your power and it takes your power away. It divides you. And you know what they say about a house divided? A house divided against itself cannot stand.
Well, cancer in general makes garbage. I don't know if people realize that.
Yes.
It just makes stuff that your body cannot use. It doesn't do anything to help the life of your body to continue. If anything, it shortens your lifespan or tries to take over so completely that the host itself dies.
Oh. And it uses your energy. It literally divides your energy into what goes to the useless junk cells and what goes to cells which are promulgating your life, are part of your actual useful. Exactly.
In other words, your body was made to function a certain way. Cancer comes in as a mutation from what is the appropriate way, the good way of functioning in your body so that everything works together. If you think about it, cancers, they don't care. They just want to feed themselves so that they can live, not realizing that they continually feed themselves until everything dies.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you're like sitting going, there's no soul here. There's no valuation of life here. This sub-program that's been put in has no life in it. No soul to it. You think about this, like cancer does not have a soul.
Well, and habits aren't all cancer, but every habit doesn't necessarily lead to damage. But the ones that do are the ones that you need to look at and get a different perspective on. And the other thing about habits, and this is something you'll notice in yourself as well, is that habits grow stronger over time.
Right.
They are I'll use the term positive feedback loop. A lot of people are not familiar, but a positive feedback loop is what makes a microphone squeal so loud that it hurts your ears, because the energy is getting fed back in and amplified and amplified and amplified. Okay. A habit is a sort of a positive feedback loop. The more you perform the habitual action, it doesn't become boring, it becomes stronger. Because it's boring things are things which the mind finds uninteresting. Habits, on the other hand, have no evaluation. They just like to do things and take energy and do it again and take energy. And they often care nothing, as Margaret just said, they care nothing, like cancer, for consequences. They just want to do their thing. You turn the crank and the light goes on. You turn the crank, the light goes on. Turn the crank, light goes on. Turn the crank, light goes on. And that turning of the crank gets easier and easier and easier, and the light coming on gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And the fact that now the habit is causing you to miss work, or causing you to abuse the people in your life, or causing you to become more and more withdrawn, more and more enraged, more and more of a monster, does not matter to the habit. The habit just wants to be the habit, until it may end up destroying you or destroying those you love. But it does not care. It doesn't, as Margaret just said, does not have a soul. It possesses a piece of your soul. It truly is a spirit, an animating spirit that bites back, wants to survive, but doesn't care a whole lot about consequences or life, or living.
It wants to survive, so what it does is it tries to take over you, your consciousness, because you are source point.
You're a prize for a habit.
And it can't survive unless you give it permission. You give permission by paying attention to it. There's an interesting thought.
I'm not so sure that you have to pay attention, but it has to be able to take your attention.
Paying attention and focusing on it is the only way it can survive.
Right. And certainly what a habit does is it practices itself. So one particular trial of a cigarette may not give you a habit to smoke. One particular exposure to a drug may not give you a drug addiction. One particular enraging experience may not give you the trigger to be enraged at this. But in the sense that it has an animation, it has a little bit of a reward, perhaps. In this enraging incident, you might have successfully defeated something, or you might have survived. Well, next time it's easier. Next time you take the drug, it's a little easier. Next time you take a cigarette, you don't cough as much. It's a little easier. And as the habit practices itself and pretends that you're getting a reward, or maybe you did get a reward, but whatever it is, there's some sort of little positive bump. When gamblers stick the money on the table and they win, there's a little bit of endorphin rush, right? There's a little bit of feedback that feeds a pleasure system. And that pleasure button that gets pressed when the habit executes, when the loop executes, because it's like a little loop, is what keeps it getting stronger. Because your body wants, your mind wants, and your body wants the hit.
Right. And maybe you should read the quote while we still have a few minutes.
That would be a good habit to inculcate in us. Well, that we had a couple quotes. The one quote that we had from Peterson was, maybe you're even just a collection of bad habits.
And there's a thought.
And there's a thought.
No, seriously. If you think about it, is that all you are?
Is that all you are?
Is a collection of bad habits. You know?
One would hope not.
Well, to take stock of that takes a tremendous amount of courage, because you have to be dedicated to truth and truth only. Is this part of me just a bad habit?
Yes. And the other thing that we found was a much longer quote. Maybe I'll read that one. It really, it's sort of in the middle of a discussion, so I'll just say the beginning of it is, to fail, you merely have to cultivate a few bad habits. You just have to bide your time. And once someone has spent enough time cultivating bad habits and biding their time, because habits love to have time to kind of burrow their way in, they are much diminished. Much of what they could have been, their potential, has been dissipated. And much of the less that they have become is now real. In other words, you get into the habit of failure. Things fall apart of their own accord. In other words, if you don't keep things together, you can see it in your own life. There's entropy. It falls apart. But the sins of men speed their degeneration, and then comes the flood. You know, habits,
destruction,
lead to dissipation, because they like cancer, they just take away things. They take away energy, and they don't give life.
They don't understand what it means to participate in the world itself. There's a sub-program that has been put together by you to execute whenever a certain stimulus occurs.
Right. It's not reality. It's an abstraction of reality.
It is an abstraction of reality. And to defer to it is something that you need to be aware of. It's like, am I just going to go into this habit form?
Right. Am I just a collection of bad habits?
Yes. And to take stock.
Let's have a good habit now and end on time.
Okay. Well, we've reached the end of our hour, and I'm Margaret.
And I am Michael.
And thank you for listening.